The rhythm of their lives in Willow Creek was predictable, a comforting cadence of morning jogs, evening barbecues, and the soft hum of sprinklers. For you, the homeowner, let's call you Alex, the backyard pool was the heart of that rhythm. It wasn't just water in a concrete basin. It was late-night swims with your kids, their laughter echoing under the stars, and quiet mornings where the ripples caught the sunrise like a canvas. The pool was yours, built with permits, paid for, with years of savings. But in Willow Creek, nothing was truly yours if Karen Whitlock, the HOA president, decided otherwise. Karen was a fixture in the neighborhood, her presence as constant as the summer heat. She patrolled the streets in her pristine white SUV, her sharp eyes scanning for infractions, a mailbox leaning slightly askew, a hedge trimmed an inch too low. Her voice, crisp and commanding, carried the weight of authority she'd granted herself. To some, she was a guardian of standards. To others, a tyrant, cloaked in pastel cardigans. Alex had stayed out of her crosshairs until the pool became her obsession. It started with a letter slipped under your door on a humid July morning. The paper was crisp, the HOA letterhead embossed, but the words were venomous. About excessive water usage and aesthetic disruption. You frowned, rereading the lines. The pool was within code, every permit was filed, every inspection passed. You called the HOA office, expecting a clerical error, but Karen's voice answered, smooth as polished glass. Alex, dear, it's not personal. Standards must be upheld. Her tone suggested it was very personal. Days later, you stood in your backyard, the scent of chlorine, faint but familiar, watching as Karen arrived with a contractor. The man, burly and apologetic, bolted a padlock onto your pool gate under her direction. Karen's heels clicked on your patio stones, each step a small declaration of victory. This is for the community's benefit, she said, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Neighbors gathered at the fence line, their murmurs a chorus of unease. Mrs. Callahan, who'd borrowed your pool floats for her grandkids, averted her gaze. Mr. Nguyen, usually chatty, stared at his feet. Karen thrived on this audience, her voice rising as she addressed them. Imagine yourself living in a neighborhood where one person's excess threatens our property values. She gestured at your pool like it was a blight. You felt heat rising in your chest, not from the sun, but from humiliation. Karen, I have the permits, you said, holding up the folder you'd retrieved from your study. She waved a manicured hand, dismissing you. Permits can be reconsidered, she replied, her voice dripping with condescension. The contractor finished his work, and Karen handed you a fine notice, $500 for non-compliance. The neighbors dispersed, their whispers trailing like smoke. You stood alone, the padlock glinting mockingly, the pool's surface still and silent. The days that followed were a blur of frustration. You appealed to the board, but the members Karen's hand-picked allies deferred to her. She's just doing her job, said Tom, the treasurer, avoiding your eyes. You tried reasoning with Karen herself, knocking on her mansion's door, its marble steps gleaming under the noon sun. She answered in a silk blouse, her smile as sharp as a blade. Alex, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Comply, and we'll move on. The door closed before you could respond. The neighborhood's rhythm shifted. Your kids stopped asking to swim, their toys abandoned by the locked gate. Friends stopped inviting you to barbecues, their excuses thin. Karen's influence was a web, and you were caught in it. But the constant struggle wasn't just yours. Others whispered their own grievances. Karen had fined the Patels for their Diwali lights, claiming they were too bright. Their garage because the shade was unapproved. Willow Creek was her kingdom, and she ruled with a velvet-gloved fist. One evening, you sat on your patio, the air thick with the scent of damp earth from a recent rain. The pool reflected the moon, a silver disk trapped behind the gate. You imagined yourself breaking the padlock, diving into the cool water, reclaiming what was yours. But Karen's smirk lingered in your mind, her voice echoing. Standards must be upheld. Anger simmered, not wild, but focused. You couldn't fight her with words or bylaw skid, rigged the game. But water, you realized, followed its own rules. If Karen wanted your pool, perhaps she'd get more water than she bargained for. You began to notice details, the irrigation lines snaking through the neighborhood, the water main humming beneath the street. Hill had a sprawling lawn fed by those same lines. An idea took root, small but persistent, like a seed in cracked pavement. You didn't act yet, but the thought was a spark in the constant struggle of your days. Karen had stolen your pool, humiliated you, and turned your neighbors into spectators. She'd underestimated you, assuming compliance was inevitable. A weapon. The segment ends here, with Alex's resolve hardening, the neighborhood's tension palpable, and the faint hum of possibility in the air. The story pauses, but the flow continues, ready to spill into the next chapter of this suburban war. The air in Willow Creek carried a new edge, sharp with the tang of anticipation, as if the neighborhood itself sensed the shift in you, Alex. The padlock on your pool gate still gleamed, a daily reminder of Karen Whitlock's triumph, but your anger had distilled into something colder, more precise. The rhythm of your life, once marked by the splash of water and your children's laughter, now pulsed with a quiet resolve. You stood on your porch, the evening breeze cool against your skin, and watched Karen's white SUV glide past, her silhouette rigid with self-assured control. She thought she'd won, but you were already mapping a counterstrike, one that would turn her own weapon. The neighborhood, though cowed, simmered with quiet resentment. At the corner store, where the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the hum of fluorescent lights, you overheard whispers. Karen's latest fine had targeted the Wilsons' birdhouse, deemed structurally unsound. The Patels, still stinging from their Diwali rebuke, nodded knowingly when you mentioned your pool. "She's untouchable," Mrs. Patel murmured, her voice low. "Or so she thinks." It was then you remembered Ethan, a plumber who'd lived 2 streets over since you were kids. He'd once fixed your burst pipe in a downpour, his hands steady despite the mud-soaked chaos. If anyone could help you wield water as a weapon, it was him. You met Ethan at his garage. Tools lined the walls, their edges glinting in the dim light, and a half-repaired sink sat in the corner, a testament to his trade. You explained Karen's theft, the padlock, the humiliation. Ethan listened, his calloused fingers tapping a wrench against his palm. "She's got the HOA board eating out of her hand," he said, his voice gravelly but calm. "But water, that's my domain." His eyes lit up, not with malice, but with the thrill of a challenge. You leaned closer, the constant struggle of your days now shared, and asked, "Can we flood her mansion?" Ethan's laugh was low, like the rumble of distant thunder. "Floods, messy," he said, "but redirecting water, that's surgical." He pulled out a worn map of Willow Creek's water system, its lines crisscrossing like veins under the neighborhood's skin. Karen's mansion, perched on its manicured hill, relied on a main line that fed her sprawling lawn and ornamental fountain. Ethan traced a finger along a pipe running beneath your street. "We reroute this," he said, "and her yard becomes a lake. She'll be too busy mopping her floors to bother with your pool." The plan was audacious but plausible, and you felt a spark of hope, fragile but growing. The next week was a blur of preparation. Ethan explained the mechanics. A valve here, a rerouted pipe there, and water would surge toward Karen's property. "It's not just about volume," he said, his voice steady. "It's about control." You nodded, imagining yourself standing in her flooded driveway, her smug smile washed away. But the plan wasn't without risks. Tampering with the water system was illegal, and if the flow went wrong, it could hit other homes. The constant struggle of your days now carried a new weight. The line between justice and recklessness. You recruited allies carefully, Mrs. Callahan. Of Karen's garage paint demands, agreed to distract her with a fake complaint about his own lawn. Their support felt like a lifeline, proof that Karen's reign wasn't absolute. You met in Ethan's garage, the group small but determined, their voices hushed against the hum of a distant lawnmower. "We're not just doing this for me," you said, the words grounding you. "It's for everyone she's bullied." Heads nodded, and the air buzzed with shared purpose. The night before the plan, you walked your backyard, the pool's still surface reflecting the stars. The padlock mocked you, but you no longer felt powerless. You imagined yourself at Karen's mansion, water pooling around her marble steps, her pristine life unraveling. The neighborhood's rhythm, so long dictated by her whims, was about to shift. Ethan's tools clinked in his bag as he joined you, his face shadowed but resolute. "Valves are ready," he said. "Tomorrow we turn the tide." You smiled, the phrase echoing in your mind. The constant struggle had led to this a plan, not just to reclaim your pool, but to dethrone a tyrant. But doubts crept in as you lay awake, the house silent except for the faint drip of a faucet. What if the water surged too far, flooding innocent homes? What if Karen traced it back to you? The scent of chlorine lingered in your memory, a reminder of what you'd lost, but also of what you stood to gain. You weren't just fighting for a pool. You were fighting for the right to live unbothered, to break free from Karen's grip. The plan was set, the players in place, and the water waited, ready to flow where you directed it. Tomorrow, Willow Creek would learn that even a tyrant's kingdom could be washed away. The night was thick with the scent of damp asphalt and blooming night jasmine, a quiet that felt like the world holding its breath. You, Alex, stood at the edge of Willow Creek's main street, the hum of the water main beneath your feet, a steady pulse in the dark. Ethan crouched beside a valve cover, his wrench glinting under the faint glow of a street lamp. The rhythm of your life had led to this moment, a crescendo of defiance against Karen Whitlock's reign. You imagined yourself watching her mansion drown, her smug control swept away by the very water she'd weaponized against you. But water, as Ethan had warned, was a fickle ally. The plan began smoothly. Mrs. Callahan, stationed at her window, texted that Karen's SUV was parked. Her mansion's lights dim. Mr. Nguyen had delivered his distraction, a rambling complaint about his lawn's uneven edging, keeping Karen occupied at her doorstep. Ethan turned the first valve, the metal groaning softly, and you felt a thrill as water shifted in the pipes below. "It's moving," he whispered, his voice taut with focus. You pictured the flow, snaking uphill, pooling in Karen's pristine lawn, seeping into her marble-floored foyer. The constant struggle of your days, her padlock, her fines. Her smirk was about to meet its match, but water doesn't obey neat plans. Ethan's second valve, rusted from years of neglect, stuck. He leaned into the wrench, his knuckles whitening, and the metal gave way with a sharp crack. A low rumble echoed underground, louder than expected, and your heart lurched. "Too much pressure," Ethan muttered, scrambling to adjust another valve. Before he could, a geyser erupted 2 streets over, water arcing into the sky like a broken fountain. The sound was deafening, a roar that shattered the neighborhood's quiet. You froze, the air now misted with spray, the scent of wet earth overwhelming. Chaos unfolded fast. The water didn't just flood Karen's mansion, it surged. Down the street, a shallow tide swallowing lawns and driveways. Porch lights flicked on, neighbors spilling out in robes and slippers, their voices a cacophony of shock. "My garage," yelled Mr. Patel, wading through ankle-deep water. Mrs. Callahan's text buzzed. "Karen's coming." You glimpsed her white SUV speeding toward the geyser, her face a mask of fury through the windshield. The plan, so carefully crafted, had spiraled into disaster. Your pool's padlock seemed a small grievance now, dwarfed by the chaos you'd unleashed. Karen leaped from her car, her silk blouse clinging to her as she stormed toward the geyser's source. You and Ethan ducked behind a hedge, its wet leaves brushing your face, but she zeroed in on you, her heels sinking into the mud. "You did this, Alex," she shrieked, her voice a banshee wail cutting through the water's roar. "You'll pay for every drop." She lunged, her manicured nails aimed at your face, and you stumbled back, slipping on the slick pavement. The neighborhood watched, a ring of silhouettes against the floodlit street, their murmurs lost in the deluge. The fight was brutal, primal. Karen's rage made her ferocious, her fists swinging as water soaked you both. You blocked her blows, your arms aching, the taste of iron in your mouth from a split lip. Ethan tried to pull her off, but she elbowed him, her eyes wild. "You think you can defy me?" she screamed, her hair plastered to her face. You shoved her back, your hands shaking, and she fell into the floodwater, her blouse stained with mud. For a moment, you stood over her, the constant struggle of your days distilled into this water-soaked showdown. But the victory felt hollow as the flood raged on, cars stalling, basements filling. Neighbors waded in, some to help, others to shout. Mr. Nguyen hauled Karen to her feet, her glare still venomous despite her sodden state. Ethan, nursing a bruised jaw, worked frantically to shut off the main valve, the water finally slowing to a trickle. The street was a mess, lawns ruined, mailboxes toppled, the air heavy with the scent of silt and gasoline. Karen, dripping and disheveled, pointed at you. "This isn't over," she hissed, before stalking back to her SUV. The crowd dispersed, their faces a mix of awe and anger, leaving you and Ethan in the wreckage of your plan. You walked home, your shoes squelching, the pool's padlock still glinting in your backyard. The flood had hit Karen's mansion. Her lawn was a swamp. Her fountain toppled, but it had also hurt others. Mrs. Callahan's garage was flooded, her photo albums ruined. The Patel's car wouldn't start. Guilt gnawed at you, mingling with the adrenaline of the fight. You imagined yourself explaining this to your kids, who'd only wanted to swim again. The constant struggle wasn't just against Karen Net, was against the unintended harm you'd caused. But whispers reached you as you dried off. The neighborhood's rhythm shifting once more. Mr. Nguyen, toweling off his driveway, muttered about Karen's shady deals. Mrs. Patel, salvaging her garden, hinted at HOA funds disappearing. The flood, though a disaster, had cracked Karen's facade, exposing cracks others hadn't dared to question. You sat on your porch, the air cool and damp, and realized the fight wasn't over. Karen's mansion was soaked, but her power wasn't broken yet. The water had done its work, but now the real battle would begin. One fought not with pipes, but with secrets. The morning after the flood, Willow Creek lay under a fragile calm, the air sharp with the scent of wet grass and sodden wood. You, Alex, stood at your kitchen window, the taste of last night's blood still faint on your lip. The street was a patchwork of drying puddles and scattered, debris-appended planters. A child's tricycle half submerged in a ditch. Your pool, still padlocked, shimmered mockingly in the sunlight, but the rhythm of your life no longer felt tethered to its loss. The flood had been a misstep, soaking more than just Karen Whitlock's mansion, but it had stirred something deeper. A neighborhood ready to question its tyrant. Karen's mansion, perched on its hill, bore the scars of the deluge. Her manicured lawn was a muddy ruin, her ornamental fountain a toppled heap of stone. Yet she emerged at noon, her silk scarf pristine, her heels clicking defiantly on her driveway. You watched from your porch, the air warm with the hum of distant lawnmowers, as she rallied her HOA allies. Tom, the treasurer, nodded obediently. Mrs. Lyle, the secretary, clutched her clipboard like a shield. Karen's voice carried, sharp and unwavering. We'll rebuild, and the culprit will pay. Her eyes locked on your house, a promise of retribution. The constant struggle of your days now felt like a chess game, and she was plotting her next move, but cracks in her empire were widening. The flood had done more than ruin lawns, it had loosened tongues. At the community mailbox, where the scent of damp paper lingered, Mrs. Patel cornered you. Karen's been skimming HOA dues, she whispered, her eyes darting. My cousin at the bank saw withdrawals, thousands, unaccounted for. Mr. Nguyen, hosing mud from his car, joined in. She bought that fountain with our money, he said, his voice low. I checked the ledgers last year. Numbers didn't add up. You listened, the pieces clicking into place. Karen's control wasn't just about power, it was profit. You and Ethan met that evening in his garage, the air thick with the scent of rust and coffee. The map of Willow Creek's water system still lay on his workbench, now stained with mud. We messed up, he admitted, his fingers tracing the pipes that had betrayed you. But this, he tapped a folder Mrs. Patel had slipped you a photocopy of HOA financial records, riddled with discrepancies. This could end her. You imagined yourself presenting the evidence, Karen's smug smile crumbling as the neighborhood the next HOA meeting was held in the community, its walls lined with faded posters of past barbecues. The air was heavy with tension, the scent of polished wood mingling with nervous sweat. Karen stood at the podium, her voice smooth as she blamed you for the flood. Alex's reckless actions cost us thousands, she declared, her allies nodding. But you, Rose, the folder in hand, your heart steady despite the eyes on you. Karen, let's talk about costs, you said, your voice calm but firm. You held up the records, detailing withdrawals tied to her personal account, $20,000 for landscaping, $15,000 for consulting fees. The room went silent, the air electric. Karen's face tightened, her smile a thin veneer. Those are baseless accusations, she snapped, but her voice wavered. Mrs. Patel stood, her voice trembling but clear. I verified them with the bank. Mr. Nguyen followed, recounting. Years of inflated fines funneled to Karen's accounts. The neighbors, once spectators, now leaned forward, their murmurs a rising tide. Karen's allies faltered. Tom stared at his shoes. Mrs. Lyle's clipboard slipped. You imagined yourself in their place, watching a tyrant unravel. The constant struggle finally tilting in your favor. The board called an emergency vote, stripping Karen of her presidency. She stormed out, her heels echoing in the stunned silence. Her mansion no longer a throne, but a liability. The police arrived days later, the scent of fresh coffee in their wake as they questioned her about embezzlement. The padlock on your pool was removed, the gate swinging open under the weight of new HOA leadership. Mrs. Patel, now interim president, handed you the key. Swim, she said, smiling. Your kids dove in that evening, their laughter echoing as the sun set. The water catching the light like a promise kept. But victory came with shadows. The flood's damage lingered Mrs. Callahan's ruined albums, the Patels' stalled car, the neighborhood's fractured trust. You sat by your pool, the air cool with the scent of chlorine and dusk, and felt the weight of unintended consequences. Karen was gone, her mansion on the market, her name a cautionary tale. Yet the constant struggle of your days had left scars. Neighbors who avoided your gaze, wary of your boldness, a faint guilt for the chaos you'd sparked. You imagined yourself, years from now, telling this story to your kids, the pool a backdrop to a lesson in fighting for what's yours, even when the cost is steep. Willow Creek's rhythm was healing, slowly. Barbecues returned, the hum of sprinklers resumed, and the air carried the scent of blooming jasmine once more. You'd reclaimed your pool, your home, your place in the neighborhood's pulse. But as you watched the water ripple under the stars, you knew the fight had changed you. Karen's fall was a victory, but the flood had taught you that even justice leaves ripples, touching lives you never meant to disturb. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of your backyard, Alex, the pool's surface catching the last amber rays of a Willow Creek sunset. The air is soft, laced with the familiar scent of chlorine and the faint sweetness of blooming jasmine from a neighbor's trellis. Your children's laughter ripples through the evening, their cannonballs sending waves to lap against the pool's tiles. The gate swings freely now, its padlock a distant memory, tossed into a drawer like a relic of a war won. Yet, as you trace the water's gentle motion, the rhythm of your life feels forever altered, not just by victory, but by the weight of what it cost. The fall of Karen Whitlock was a spectacle, a tale now whispered at barbecues and mailboxes. where the scent of charcoal and damp earth mingles with the neighborhood's cautious rebirth. Her mansion stands empty, its for sale sign leaning slightly in the muddied lawn, a monument to her unraveling. The HOA records, once her shield, became her undoing. Each line of embezzled funds a thread pulled until her empire collapsed. The police carted away files, their boots tracking silt across her marble steps, while neighbors watched, their faces a mix of vindication and unease. You stood among them, the folder of evidence, your weapon, but the constant struggle of those days lingers in your bones. A quiet ache beneath the triumph. Victory was sweet, yet it shimmered with shadows, like the pool reflecting a clouded sky. The key Mrs. Carter handed you, rough and cold in your palm, unlocked more than a gate hit, restored your place in Willow Creek's pulse. Your kids swam again, their toys bobbing in the water, their joy a balm for the months of silence. Mrs. Patel, now steering the HOA with a steady hand, waved off your thanks. We all needed this, she said, her smile warm but tired. The neighborhood's rhythm stirred anew. Mr. Nugent's garage repainted in his chosen shade, the Patels. Diwali lights glowing unrebuked, Mrs. Callahan's grandkids splashing in borrowed floats. Karen's grip had loosened, and Willow Creek breathed easier, but the flood's ripples touched lives you hadn't meant to disturb. Mrs. Callahan's photo albums, their edges curled from water, sat in a box she couldn't bear to open. Patel's car, towed for repairs, drained their savings. Neighbors who once nodded in passing now hesitated, their eyes flickering with wariness. You'd fought for your pool, for fairness. But the chaos you unleashed, water surging down streets, ruining lawns, upending lives, cast you as both hero and disruptor. You imagined yourself in their shoes, weighing justice against loss, and wondered if they'd forgive the flood's unintended toll. The constant struggle taught you water's dual nature. It nurtures, but it destroys. Karen used it to divide, locking your pool to assert her reign. You wielded it to reclaim, but its flow defied your control, soaking more than her mansion. Now, as you sit by the pool, the air cool against your skin, you see the lesson etched in every ripple. Power, like water, must be guided, not unleashed. Karen's fall was necessary, but the flood was a warning to her, to you, to anyone tempted to fight fire with a deluge. You fought for your home, your family, your right to live unbothered. But the scars remind you that even righteous battles leave marks. Willow Creek is healing, its rhythm finding balance. The sprinklers hum at dawn, the scent of fresh-cut grass drifts through open windows, and laughter spills from backyards once more. You're part of that rhythm, your pool, a gathering place again, its water, a mirror for summer stars. But you carry the story quietly, sharing it only when your kids ask why the gate was once locked. Sometimes you tell them you have to stand up, even if it makes waves. They nod, their faces lit by the pool's glow, and you hope they'll learn to fight with precision, sparing the innocent from their tides as you rise. The evening air soft and heavy, you glance at the street where Karen's SUV once patrolled. It's quiet now, the neighborhood's pulse steady but wiser. You won, your pool is yours, your home secure, your name cleared. But the constant struggle, the push and pull of pride and justice, lives on in memory, a current beneath the calm. You turn back to the pool, its water still, and feel a gentle peace. The fight is over, the ripples fading, and Willow Creek, like you, is ready to swim again.